or this go too far under.
Whether it be bass, today I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of how I prepare for walleye fishing at night. Some of these concepts will play into fall as well, but this is how I get prepared in the beginning of the year to make sure that I'm all ready to catch fish for the rest of the season. Alright, so I want to start with the basics. What rod I use, what reel I use, the line, those kind of things. So the first thing that I use is I have this St. Croix Icon rod here. I didn't really know much about St. Croix, but Austin at Discount Tackle, he's part of their pro team and made some suggestions, said that they're great rods. I tried one and I'm absolutely hooked. The rod itself is a 7-foot medium light power fast action tip. Now you can buy a super fast action tip, but I find that the fast action is just sensitive enough for you to feel those light bites from walleyes. So next up is the Shimano KS reel. It's about a $40 reel. I don't like to spend a ton of money on my reels. I know there's very expensive ones you can get for a few $100 or even more. I just wreck mine too much. You know, they end up in the sand or they end up hitting a rock because I slip and fall or whatever. Some of you watched my night walleye video from last year saw that I ate it pretty hard on the rocks. So I just beat my stuff up a little bit too much for me to spend too much money. So, and then I have this actually wound up with 20-pound Fireline smoke braid. Underneath that braid is actually 10-pound monofilament. That's just creating a little more bite for the braid on the actual spool. When you have braid tied to metal and it gets wet, or if it's too loose, it'll actually start to spin on the reel and you won't be able to pull in that fish that you've hooked. So make sure if you're using braid or using a different compound than a monofilament or maybe a fluorocarbon, you use something as kind of a backing similar to what you would do with a fly reel. I have about 200 yards of that spooled up, and then at the beginning of every season, I actually spooled this up last fall. So I'm not replacing the line, but a lot of times I will, especially if the first 100 yards of it is very frayed. You'll notice with Fireline, it goes from like a thin, waxy type material that you would almost be able to floss your teeth with to just kind of a beat up, like almost thread consistency that turns white. So that's how you know sometimes it's a good time to either replace your line or cut off the first 50 yards or whatever's been basically brutally beat on the rocks and torn up by fish. So what I do at the beginning of every season is clip off all that frayed line, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you now how I tie up the rest of the rig. I use that same double uni knot that I used in order to connect the monofilament to the braid on the actual spool. And I'm going to go ahead and tie on, this is Easy Fluoro by Spider Wire. And this is 8-pound test in particular. You could use something smaller. I like the 8-pound test. It seems that the diameter of this complements the braid diameter and really holds on at that knot pretty strong. So some people actually stop here and they'll just tie directly onto the braid. And that's great. As long as the water is super muddy or dirty, you can do that. But if you have any sort of clear water, or you have really spooky fish, or maybe an area that's seen a lot of pressure, you might consider tying on like a fluorocarbon leader. Fluorocarbon is that line that fish don't see. So I usually tie on about 6 feet of the fluorocarbon leader. I try not to have the knot that I create go through the guides. That's just another pain reeling in a fish. It's another chance to lose that fish. So I try to make it about a foot shorter than the length of my rod. That just gives me the ability to get a net on the fish or get the fish in close enough to where I can land it without having that knot go through the guide. So I'm going to go ahead and use the double uni knot to connect the fluorocarbon leader to the end of my braid line. And then I'll go ahead and do that and come back and show you guys what the next step is. Alright, so I have my fluorocarbon tied on. Now I'm going to tie on what's called a duo lock snap, or just like a traditional snap. This I tie on because at night it's really hard to be able to see. I don't have the best eyesight, so sometimes it's easier to switch out your lures with just this little snap. I'll go ahead and put a picture of that here so you guys can see kind of a close-up of what that looks like. So I tie this onto the end of that leader to make it easier for me to switch in and out my lures. Whether I'm tying on a jerk bait or a swim bait or deep diving bait, I want to be able to cover multiple parts of the water column, so I use this snap because it helps me switch out quicker and really find out where the fish are feeding, what part of the water. And that basically is it for my nighttime walleye rig. So after I tie this on, I'll go ahead and move towards some baits and show you guys some of my key baits and some of the other tackle that I bring along with me for night fishing. All right, so now I got that dual lock snap tied on. Use the cinch knot to connect the fluorocarbon to the snap. You can also reference that video I showed earlier with the knot tying to see how to tie that knot. Now we're going to move on to baits. Now, a lot of you actually saw my video recently where I doctored some baits with the suspend strips to help them suspend perfectly in the water column. That was all done with a snap on the front of the bait. Again, I referenced that in the video. This is the reason why, because I want to be able to quickly change out my baits, and this snap, as light as it is going to add weight to the nose of that bait. And you don't want that small add in weight to change the sink or rise of your bait depending on the water temperature that you're fishing. So that's why if you check out this video, we use the snap on the front of all of our baits to make sure that they were balanced perfectly with the snap that you'll be using. Okay, so what I'm gonna go through is this is kind of my I don't leave home without stuff. If I was stranded on an island and I needed to catch walleye to eat, what would I bring? This is it. If I'm not gonna be walking, more than a mile trying to find fish, I might bring more stuff. But when I am working longer distances or trying to cover a lot of shoreline, this is what I bring along with me for the shore. So these are the essential tools. I keep my packs really light. I try to make sure I bring one rod and reel combo that I love and another one as a backup. You never know when your stuff's going to fail you. You don't want to be 30 minutes into your fishing trip, fall on a rock, crack your reel, and then all of a sudden you got to walk back to the car. So what do I not leave home without? Pliers. Gotta have a pair of pliers. Anyone will do. These ones were, I think, $3 from Walmart. You gotta be able to take the hooks out of the fish's mouth. Gotta have pliers. That's a given. Most of you have those. Second thing, scissors. These again, $2 at Walmart, or pretty much any scissors will work if you have some laying around the house. This will cut braid. Nail clippers, your teeth, not good for braid, so make sure you bring scissors. Extra fluorocarbon line. You don't want to break off your leader and then not have any, and the fish don't want to bite your stuff anymore because the water's too clear and they can see your braid. So always make sure you bring a spool of extra fluorocarbon. Next thing I like to bring along, I don't always use, but I do bring it with me every time I go. Fish can smell oil, they can smell gas, they can smell scents. That's why they tell you not to, be playing around with your motor on your boat and then, hooking on a worm, because the worm's going to smell that, the fish aren't going to be attracted to it. Likewise, since they can smell, I try to come up with a better juicy combo. So this is actually smelly jelly. This is called their walleye feast flavor, and I try to get something that's very similar to a shad scent. So if I can find shad scent, great. I know that Gulp makes some, Smelly Jelly, there's a bunch of companies that make this stuff. I try to get the liquid. And all I do with this is just kind of coat it on the bait, cast it out maybe 15 or so times, and then maybe put on another coat. Very, very minimal amount that you need to put on there, but I feel like sometimes this helps, sometimes it doesn't. I don't use it all the time, but I do bring it with me every time I go. Now down to the baits. So the number one thing I make sure to bring with me is something Fire Tiger. Something that has a black back, an orange belly, green and yellow sides, has lots of bright colors. I need this because if the water is dirty, fish are going to see this. This seems to be a great color for me, especially in the early and late season. So I always recommend bringing something Fire Tiger. This is one in particular I painted up. It's got the longer bill, so it's more of a deep diving lure, but always bring something Fire Tiger with you. The Bomber Long A. This is one of my go-to lures for catching fish, especially early season. It's got that really slow walk the dog look right on the top of the surface. If you crank it a little bit harder, it'll go down and rise back up. And when you pause this bait, a lot of walleyes can't resist it. This is actually one that was chipped and flaked, and I actually painted this up with kind of a golden trout color. So this is a essential lure. Smithwick Rogue. These have some of the best action I've seen, especially for a walleye lure. They go nuts over these. Doesn't matter really what color you have. When you have a Rogue tied on, you're probably going to catch fish. Great lure. This has been, for a long time, my go-to lure. If I need to catch fish or I'm searching for fish, this is usually what I'll use. And then maybe I'll kind of tweak it from there on out. This is a Rick Clunn RC Sticks Lucky Strike lure. And this is a very similar version to the Megabass. It's just cheaper. I want to say they go for about $9 at Cabela's or Bass Pro. These lures have great action. They elicit strikes. They're very jerky lure. I would use this probably more towards the summertime to try to elicit, quicker reaction strikes. Pala X-Wrap. This one in particular, I think is their middle size is like a 7, I think, or a 5, something like that. This color is an orange belly with kind of like a greenish back. They had a color that I liked better than this, which is a Tennessee shad color, and that one seemed to work phenomenal. Even the perch color was pretty good. This one still works, but I don't like it as much as those other colors. It has kind of that rooster tail type back treble hook, and these things are exactly like those Rick Cluns I just explained. They're very twitchy, very jerky lure. These ones will elicit those reaction bites as well. Sometimes I actually do leave without this lure, but this year I'm starting to bring this one back. This is the Berkeley Fire Stick. I've had great success with this lure last year. It has a little bit different profile than the Berkeley Flicker Shad. It's a little bit thinner, and I think the fish see that as an advantage. I always leave with something a little bit smaller profile so that I have that option in my box. The last actual hard bait that I bring with me is actually a very cheap secret. I've caught a lot of fish on this pattern right here. Some of my bigger walleye have been caught on this pattern. It mimics a shad, it mimics a bleeding shad, but it also has some colors that really are similar to some of the crawdad we have in our local lakes. This is a diving lure, so this is going to go down and get those fish that aren't in that middle part of the water column. I usually will drop this down to the rocks and pop it up and kind of let it pendulum or swing back. And on that pendulum, when it's falling back down to the rocks again before I yank it back up, that's when the fish are really going to go after this. So cannot leave the house without some deep diving bait, but this cotton cordell is awesome. You can get them for like $4 at Walmart, super cheap. I also bring some jig heads with me. The first jig head is kind of that head style that rests on the bottom. It keeps the hook up and away from the rock, so you get less snags with this. So I try to use that jig head as much as possible. And then the other thing is when the water's a little bit murky, or maybe they like a little bit of rattle or vibration, I actually use either a Roadrunner, which kind of looks like a pony style head, or I use really any jig head that has kind of a little spoon on it, something to create some flash, create some vibration. I find that the willow blades typically work best. For those jigs, the plastics that I like to use are these Twitch Tail Minnows by Berkeley. This whole bag cost me about $5. They're white, they're 3 inches long. The reason I try to go with 3 inches or larger is because I can always cut those down to smaller sizes by taking off the front of the bait, but I can never make them bigger. So I always try to go with something a little bit bigger just in case the fish are biting something longer. I can always adjust from there. If they're not liking something longer, I can move to a smaller bait. Okay, guys, so that's pretty much it for my tackle, the baits that I use, what kind of line I'm using, what are my essentials that I bring along. Make sure you don't forget a headlamp when you're out there. Good shoes, waders will always help if you want to get a little bit deeper into the water. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have questions or comments, please leave those down below. We're going to be doing the giveaway fairly soon once I hit 500 subscribers. So if you aren't subscribed already, make sure you click the button. And I really appreciate you guys tuning in today. Look forward to seeing you guys out there, and we'll see you in the next video. So you came to the channel, you liked what you saw. If you do me one more thing before you leave and just click the subscribe button right here, that'll help me out a lot.